Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on guidance and coping strategies for supporting students, including those with autism spectrum disorder and with an intellectual disability, and colleagues with anxiety and stress in uncertain and turbulent times. We are delighted that Larry Schallert and Dr. Molly K. Rarick agreed to present today. Before I officially introduce our first presenter, please allow me to address a few logistical items. I'm Will Francis, Project Director for Post-Secondary Education at the UCLA Tarjan Center. The Tarjan Center at UCLA is a federally designated Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, the organizer and your host for today's webinar. Support for today's webinar comes from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office through a contract that enables us to provide technical assistance and training to California Community College's disability support services professionals who are working to provide equitable supports, services, and opportunities for students with disabilities, including intellectual disability and autism. Today's webinar is designed to respond to emerging needs to support students' mental health and well-being in the wake, presence, and aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic. And as we transition to support students into the summer, fall, and beyond. For today's webinar, some of our colleagues are unable to participate and have requested a recording of the proceedings. To facilitate access to a clean recording of the webinar, we have muted all calls. As we proceed through the presentations, our presenters would love to respond to questions that arise from or that are related to the content of the presentation. Please look at the bottom of the Zoom program display where you will find a chat or text area. We're asking that you insert your questions into the chat feature throughout the duration of the webinar. We will address your questions and welcome you to submit as many questions as naturally arise. If time allows, we will field a few questions after the presentations, and the presenters may respond to your questions throughout the webinar in the chat feature. This may be a good time to test the chat feature. Please take this opportunity to enter a greeting into the chat area. Thank you. Before the onset of COVID-19, many of our institutions were having conversations and initiating practices designed to improve outcomes that were focused on increasing the number of students who earn a degree, credential, certificate, or who transfer to four-year institutions or attain employment in high-demand jobs consistent with the Vision for Success, Guided Pathways, and AB 705. In the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, it will be important for the colleges to be aware of and have some strategies for addressing the mental health needs of students with autism and intellectual disability. In today's presentation, our presenters will share information, strategies, and resources that may be helpful as we transition from the height of the COVID-19 pandemic and move into summer, fall, and plan for the future. To all our webinar participants, thank you for joining us today. And now I will provide some information about our first presenter. Larry Schallert is the Assistant Director of Student Health and Wellness and Mental Health Program at the College of the Canyons. He directs the college's personal counseling and wellness outreach programs and is a member of the Behavioral Intervention Incident Command and Sexual Assault Response teams. He graduated from the University of Southern California with an MSW. He is a licensed clinical social worker, holds a pupil personnel services credential, is a diplomat in clinical social work, has a private practice consulting and serving youth, family, and adults, and has served as an adjunct professor teaching master's level psychopathology and assessment courses. He has more than 35 years of leadership experience working in community mental health, public schools, and education. Larry has received local, state, and national recognition for his leadership in developing school-based mental health programming, and several of his programs have been used as models in the Los Angeles County area. Most recently, he was named to the Los Angeles County Mental Health Commission and the Los Angeles County Sheriff Department's Mental Health Advisory Committee. Last year, he was honored as the National Association of Social Workers Social Worker of the Year, and his program received congressional recognition for leadership in the area of addressing mental health on campus and in the community. He has published articles in national journals and presented at local, state, and national conferences on a variety of issues related to school, college-based mental health, autism, and mental illness. He chairs the Santa Clarita Valley Committee on Suicide Prevention and Postvention and is a past chair and founding member of the Santa Clarita Valley Blue Ribbon Task Force on Transition Age Youth and the Committee on Human Trafficking. He initiated and chaired the Santa Clarita Valley Interagency Committee, is on the Board of Activities, Recreation and Care, or ARC, a program designed for persons with developmental disabilities, and is a board member of California Community College Mental Health and Wellness Association, representing the southern section of the state. He chairs the College of the Canyons Body Mind Wellness Committee, was on the Santa Clarita Valley Anti-Gang Task Force and the Coalition for Dually Diagnosed and Westside Regional Task Force for Regional Centers. Larry helped to form the Autism Social Alliance, or ASA, on the campus at College of the Canyons. He is a member of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Threat Assessment Regional Evaluation Teams Working Group and Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health Service Area Advisory Committee. As well as he serves on the William S. Hart Healthcare Advisory Board and has collaborated with city, county, state, and community partners in order that seamless services are provided to cooperation, training, and linkages. Welcome back, Larry, and thank you for your willingness to share from the wealth of your knowledge with the community colleges. And now, without further ado, here is Larry Schallert. Larry?
Thank you very much, Francis. We really appreciate it. And it's so exciting to be here. Really happy to help in any way I can. So thanks for that introduction. And I told him to keep it short, but he just kept going on and on. So I appreciate it. So we want to just kind of start by kind of calming everybody down. I like this picture because it sort of calms you down. A lot of stuff we'll talk about could be kind of triggering, as we say. So and so we want to make sure that if any of this stuff sort of brings up things for you, just make sure that you take care of yourself and take a break. So just want to make sure you're aware of that sort of stuff. Really here to talk about these sort of things, give you some coping strategies. We'll be moving in and out of the subject of intellectual and developmental disabilities because we all are feeling some of this anxiety and stress in it's very turbulent time. So you'll hear me weaving in and out. And this is true for our colleagues and people we work for and people who work under us and with us. So keep that all in mind, please. This is what we do at the College of the Canyons. It's an integrated health and mental health wellness program. We're still doing telehealth for the most part. We've seen a few students on campus that really need it, but mostly we're doing health and mental health, wellness, all these things, including assistance with housing and security. And we have these clubs, Autism, Social Alliance, Active Minds, and we're starting a peer advocacy team this year that's we're really, really looking forward to. And we have a NAMI's Connections group, which means a peer group for people that have mental health issues or serious mental health issues. Want to just highlight a little bit the Autism Social Alliance. This is one of my favorite things I do every week, 3:30 every week. We meet summer, winter, whatever. We have a lot of fun. We do all kinds of things during COVID, though. We've been doing mostly arts and expression, but it's kind of a place for the students to kind of drop in. They love it. They don't miss it every week. So they really find that this is a place where they know they can hang out. They share their art. Some of these folks are really super creative. They really know their film and their entertainment and their video games and how to create video games and how to make films. You know, all kinds of programming that I don't know how to do, but I just kind of ask them and they talk about it. So I highly suggest every school should have something like this. I could talk more about it if you like later on. I want you to keep in mind that people do recover from mental health issues, especially, you know, such as anxiety and PTSD. Sometimes we think people don't, and they have it, but we know people can and do recover. We know that stigma is a major barrier to people seeking timely care, and this is true in a lot of our social, economic, and cultural communities, as well as people on the spectrum. We want to, hopefully we'll have some time to talk about some of the warning signs, but we won't really dwell on this warning signs too much, but we will give you a little bit about what to do if somebody's thinking about suicide with the mental health first aid. And keep in mind, always want to keep in mind cultural and socioeconomic issues. We'll be touching on that as well. So again, I like to calm myself down, but calm yourself down. Just kind of sit back and relax and try to keep breathing, okay? Start with trauma. We try to have a trauma-focused approach. We talk about trauma-focused pedagogy here. We have trauma-focused education. But in Santa Clarita, where the college is, we've had a lot of traumas, you know, and not starting with COVID, but COVID is a very prominent trauma that we've all been going through. We'll talk about that more specifically in the next few slides. But we had the Saugus shooting where a boy came on and shot several students. We've had these, as we all have, had the civil unrest sparked for what happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others. We had the borderline shootings. A lot of our students did go to that borderline club out in Thousand Oaks. And they also went to the Las Vegas shooting. So we're right in the middle of those two areas. And anybody that's into country western stuff from Santa Clarita, they go to those. We've had the fires. Like the fire came right down in my house. We had to put it out with ourselves, with the hoses and our neighbors. So that's pretty traumatic. Holiday blues won't get into, but we've gone through some serious election distress, right? It seems like we're still going through election distress. But just last week, we had a firehouse shooting where a man came in and shot, you know, a couple of people in the firehouse and then killed himself. And we had this murder of a mother of three. And now we're having these all these assaults on our Asian American Pacific Islander brothers and sisters. So stuff's going on in addition to COVID. So we try to keep these trauma kinds of focused approaches in mind. But as you are probably aware, the crisis highlights major social weaknesses in our fabric of our communities, including nursing homes and homelessness, you name it, prisons, law enforcement, trust between law enforcement and communities, the meatpacking industries, as you've just recently heard, it's even worse. But immigration issues and the labor issues of people in the agriculture industry, they kept working all this time. You know, they didn't get to go home and work from, you know, home in a Zoom thing. They had to keep going, and so did mental health services. So we also, you know, noticed that there's mental health services disparities. There's disparities in medical services and disparities in access. So some of the weaknesses of our communities is kind of like really coming into focus here. But when you have a trauma-focused approach, you really look at some of these issues, like you look at some of these symptoms and manifestations like anxiety and hypervigilance. You know, all of these things that come in trauma, depression, sadness, guilt. People feel guilty for things that they may not really need to feel guilty about, and probably don't, but they get focused on guilt and they get stuck on guilt. You know, sleep issues, irritability. With trauma comes suicidal ideation. It's not uncommon. Flashbacks, nightmares, problems sleeping. Dissociation is what's people coming back, they feel kind of dissociated. And I put down here, needing professional help is beneficial. Not always. you know, but it's often beneficial with trauma, and talking about the experience is therapeutic. So if you're a school person, knowing that somebody just talking to you can be really helpful. But also if you can help them to get some professional help if some of this stuff goes on for weeks and weeks. So we're returning to campus, as Francis said. Um, and some of us feel really excited about it, you know, and some of us are apprehensive, and some of us are kind of ambivalent. Well, I don't know if I'm gonna like it or not. Some of them aren't really, some people are not even really in touch with how they do feel, you know, and some may feel really relief, like they like the structure, they like looking forward to the camaraderie, as you are all aware when you're at school, you know, on the campus, or even back at your work, wherever that is, or you're a student, there's camaraderie. So you maybe feel more productive with the synergy of working together. So, you know, I kind of challenge you now to sort of take a look at how you feel. Just sort of take a moment, just to be mindful of what your mental health status is. How are you feeling? You know, what are you feeling right now in terms of, you know, like Francis said, we've been through this year. We're going into summer. That's one thing. We're going into fall. That's another thing. And we're all kind of having maybe some of this stuff going on. But in the past year, it's been really emotional turbulence is the best word I can come up with. You know, there's been stress and trying to do different things. All faculty and staff have had to learn how to do different things. We all kind of switched and changed, and now we're changing again. You know, but really like to. It's not and I really want people to keep in mind the anger and anguish that we're sort of seeing, experiencing in our daily lives. You know, the Black African American, Latinx, API, you know, they're experiencing in the US some real frustration having to accommodate the stereotypes. You know, Black African American students I've been talking to, you know, they're just really frustrated. There's this anguish, you know, why do I have to put on a sweater, a nice shirt, you know, a collared shirt, and be careful every time I walk out of the house? What's with that? How come when I drive across Santa Clarita Valley, I get stopped 3 times, you know, where, you know, I don't get stopped driving across, but they might end up with their hands on the trunk of their car, you know, on the hood of their car. They might end up sitting down on the curb. That's never happened to me, you know, and so I'm privileged in that way. But the frustration to accommodate those stereotypes is really, really difficult to manage. So just sort of knowing that that kind of turbulence is going on right on top of all the rest of it, you know, African, Asian American Pacific Islanders, now they have, you know, they're walking around thinking, well, when am I going to get, somebody's going to come up from behind me and push me down, that sort of thing, you know. That's on top of COVID, right? Maybe there's some connection, and maybe it's just an exacerbation of some of the, you know, the racism that's just sort of endemic. But people are having economic troubles. There's unemployment, there's layoffs, people are stressed, people going on Medi-Cal when they never had to, and some people that's shameful, and for some people it's just, you know, a godsend. But, you know, parents and teachers have had to make, you know, really difficult adjustments. We know that child abuse, while reporting is on the downcline, the severity of the child abuse is increased, because, you know, most students are identified both in the domestic violence when it comes to school, but also with child abuse. You know, they're identified at school, and without being in school, the child abuse gets out of control, and some really bad things are happening. So if you talk to anybody from DCFS, they'll tell you the reports have gone down, but the severity has gone up dramatically. So for all of us, and for a lot of people, depression and anxiety are kind of creeping in. So I like to say our well-being is being challenged, right? We're more fragile. Our colleagues are more fragile. Families and friends are more fragile. So what we're trying to do is make sure everybody is aware of that in themselves, but also our colleagues and families, people who work for us, you know, as well as people we work for, you know, even those. So we're grieving, right? We're grieving the loss of normalcy and predictability. We don't even really know on our campus whether we're going back in the fall. What's going on? We don't know. We may know more next week. We may not. But other losses, you know, the loss of graduation and proms and holidays. Everybody's kind of gone through this. for faculty and staff, the relationship with our students and colleagues. We have relationships with our students on the spectrum, but I'm in a, as Francis said, I'm on the board of a program that deals with intellectual disabilities and ASD. And the thing that makes you really happy about that is them coming in every day, and all the connection, the relationship, same with us, relationship with our students and colleagues really is what makes us go. It's why we're in the business, right? So that's gone too, in many ways. We're missing big events, big celebrations. Hopefully that's coming back. But some people have actually lost friends. Some people have lost parents. Some people have lost families. So we want you to really be aware that people have had coming in with some loss, and this is true with people with intellectual disability as well. I lost a sister this year who had Down syndrome. So it's like this stuff kind of hits you really seriously, but loss of touch, just being able to hug people. We all know how therapeutic hugging is, but we haven't been able to touch people recently. I'm just amazed now I can actually touch doorknobs without like having to wash my hands. It's like weird. But people that had mental health issues to start with are even more vulnerable. So this also includes people on the spectrum and people with ID, but people with bipolar disorder and psychosis, they don't have the same kind of support that they may have used to have. They're sort of in their house, and so it can get, I can tell you things have gotten really worse for some of those folks. And of course, youth that haven't been able to socialize. And let's give it up for our law enforcement and firefighters, paramedics, teachers, and grocery workers, meatpacking, farm workers. I talked to our waste management guy. He comes by, he goes, yeah, like everybody's out. So I'm working like, 2 shifts every day because we have so many people that are out on COVID. So it doesn't matter, whether you're working at a food bank or homeless shelter, everybody's been, really affected. I got this quote from Hector Martinez. He's a person on the spectrum that also has, anxiety and depression and that sort of thing. And he says, he was quoted in the Times, I have years of experience being separate from society, right? This is normal to me, all these issues down here, you see uncertainty, unexpected events, lack of control. If you're on the spectrum, or even if you have intellectual disabilities, all these issues are always there, they're always kind of dealing with that. So, they're desperate, routine, disrupted. It's going to be really, really difficult, always having difficult with transition, always things seem like unexpected things happening, right? So what he said, this is the way I always feel, So what he says is, please lean into that feeling and remember it later. So those feelings that you have right now, in terms of, all from the beginning of COVID to now, lean into those feelings and remember it, because people on the spectrum feel that all the time. That's not unusual for them. So, what will really help? Well, some socialization, seeing my friends, seeing some, colleagues, not being so isolated, some kind of routine where I know I'm, all the stuff that you need right now, people on the spectrum need all the time. So hopefully you can kind of lean into that feeling and remember it as your students and colleagues and friends kind of get back together. We know on the LGBTQ plus front, there's a 72% plus report increase in mental health problems with some studies that just came out, and some 43% increase in suicidal ideation. So we know that our brothers and sisters that are LGBTQ plus are even more stressed out, and you can imagine why. Maybe because they're isolated, maybe they're in a family home, at a family that doesn't accept them, and that sort of thing. But getting back to people on the spectrum, this is like really basic. Most of you know this stuff. They can be people on the autism spectrum can be with support very successful. Sometimes just attending is an accomplishment. Sometimes it's extremely stressful, and isolation is a hazard, which is one of the reasons why we do our Autism Social Alliance, because isolation is one of the big hazards. And most students, they really appreciate whether they're ID, regular students, neurotypical, or on a spectrum, they appreciate the support from the faculty and peers. So we want to always kind of reach out to our faculty, to our students. And, you know, this is not new to you. Um, you know, people on the spectrum and ID have many positive attributes. They can contribute, right? They have unique perspectives. They can be very persistent. They can do things. We have several programs on our campus where, you know, our students do exceptionally well because they're on the spectrum. They have certain attributes that make them really good at some things. You know, film and TV and computer technology and blocking on Uniquely Abled Academy, where they learn how to make, you know, airplane parts and stuff. So, and movies and TV and sound stuff. So we can name a whole bunch of stuff that they're really, really good at, you know, better at than us and me in some way, of course. But loneliness is a big deal. Research supports the view that individuals with autism do not necessarily prefer loneliness. That's sort of the myth. You know, they like to be alone, but they actually like to be understood. They like to be accepted. And as you all know, people with intellectual disability are often overtly social. I can tell you, my sister was the most social person you've ever met. But these issues really affect people on the spectrum, right? And people with mental health issues, you know, stress, social, these, you know, you see these social rejection, all these things, lack of acceptance, these things can really affect the functioning of students in the college setting. Prejudice, economic disadvantage, you know, for some cultural groups, acceptance is not a given. Sometimes it's shame, sometimes they're overly protective, sometimes they keep people isolated. And it can be a real issue with safety and law enforcement because they may not be able to communicate as well as some of the others when it's, you know, something's going on in the community. But I want to, you know, also keep aware of what else is going on. You know, trauma. This is not just people on the spectrum, but not altogether all the things that have been going on with everything I've been talking about. But, you know, people have other kinds of, you know, trauma, like sexual assault. You know, people have mental illness, psychosis. I can talk forever on all of these things, but just pay attention to some of these things like relationships. People kill themselves because of relationships. So when somebody comes to you and says, I'm having difficulty with my girlfriend, or my boyfriend, or whoever, you got to stop and pay attention, because people do kill themselves around relationships. All these things, you know, substance abuse, autism, military service, people coming back. As you probably know, people coming back from the military are high hazard for suicide, and it's not just because they've been in combat. There's other issues, but sometimes they just don't feel like they're connected with anybody, even after they've, you know, been overseas or wherever and operated multi-million-dollar weapon systems and you know, commanded battalions of 35, 50, 100 people. They come into our campuses and they just don't feel like they really fit in or understood or appreciated. You know, first responders, you know, and any combination of this is going on. So you just have to be kind of aware that your students and your colleagues, this stuff is going on, and you know, it's all going on. So what can we do? Self-care is crucial, right? And this is for people you work with and people that work for you. You consider, and yourself, you know, consider mental health days as a healthy use of vacation time. Keep a pulse on team members, you know, fellow students, empathize, assess, address the stigma. Like, it's okay to not feel okay right now. I had to make that point dramatically in my management team. We have management team, you know, for all the campus. And I go, look, you know, I was telling Francis, look, everybody's feeling it right now. So just be aware that, you know, there's stigma to talking about your mental health issues, but try to address that stigma and try to make clear and transparent safety measures so everybody knows. But you know, if you're the one that has to implement it, it's no fun. Certainly a couple months ago when you know, you had to make sure everything was clean, and it's like, oh, we got really crazy with this stuff. So just acknowledge that the transition challenges have great, you know, the transitions challenges and the difficulty in getting used to changing from being home routine. I mean, I'm going back and forth. You know, I'm here all this week, but last week I was back and forth. So I got to carry all kinds of stuff back and forth. It's kind of like stressful. It's kind of like a pain, you know, but that's like easy compared to some folks, you know. But, you know, offer flexible schedules, you know, embrace and normalize a culture of self-care and open dialogue and conversation. Right? So we need to build back our stamina. We don't, you know, to me, I was like ready to go at 9 o'clock in my house, you know, but now I got to be ready to go at 8 o'clock to get to work. So got to build back that stamina, not as much sleep, you know. But what else you can do for neurodiverse students, you know, just make yourself available. These are, you know, you sort of know these probably intuitively, but I'll say them anyway. Make yourself available, listen non-judgmentally, tune into some of the emotions, give reassurance, have patience. You have to have a sense of humor, right? Take the time to allow a relationship for people on the spectrum and people with ID and students in general. Relationships may take a little bit longer, but you want to give people space and establish routines. Be really clear about your boundaries. Some people on the spectrum, for instance, their boundaries are a little bit, you know, different than ours, you know, so they may come up closer to you than you feel comfortable with, and just sort of establish the boundaries, be clear. See the person, he's not autistic, he's a person on the autism spectrum, you know, okay? He's not schizophrenic, he's a person that has schizophrenia. She is not bipolar, she's a person that has a bipolar disorder. She's not a broken leg, she's a kid with a broken leg. So see the person, not the disability. Become an ally, connect with the family, especially with people on the spectrum, people with ID. Connecting with the family and the siblings is important. And sometimes you have to really use a little more animation in your classroom than you might have to with neurotypical students. I like this picture because she's stretching out, you know, she's happy, she's doing something that we recommend for stress management. She's got her hands back behind her head, she's stretched out. You can do that in the privacy of your own home. You're on a webinar, so you can do that right now. Try that, it will make you feel better, guaranteed. We might run out of time for this. I'm gonna skip the, I don't know, what do you think, Francis? Think we can fit this in? Let's just skip it. That was a little, that was a little video on anxiety. Well, let me just what? Let's see, 1:30. Now we're gonna run out of time, so I'm gonna skip this, but we can maybe show it later. So again, kind of calm down, relax, and take it easy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about stress. So in Santa Clarita, we are called often Awesome Town. So people have this stress. I just talked to somebody yesterday. He's got an AA. He takes like 20 plus units. He works full time for the city, and he really wants to get into a university back east, but he'll settle for UCLA or USC. I'm going, oh man. He's really stressed out at all times trying to get straight A's. And then we're a Hispanic serving institution. We have a big Asian Pacific Islander community here. So, you know, there's some pressure to be perfect. And that, of course, causes all kinds of distress. So how do you know you're stressed? You know, you may feel like that. But these are the kinds of, this is the way stress is manifested. So if you're feeling anxious, you're feeling anger, feeling fatigued. My dissertation was on stress, and we found a one-to-one correlation between anxiety and anger and stress. So if you're feeling anger and anxiety, you might be stressed, right? So you have all these other feelings of trauma and difficulty concentrating. These you might be feeling, but just pay attention to, you know, if you're in school, you're stressed to start with, you know, and if you're on the spectrum, you're probably even more stressed, you know. So these are stress signs you want to pay attention to with your students and with each other. Right? So these are the typical stressors. Don't forget, professors are stressed too. I tell students, college is stressful. It's the nature of it. We don't give you a diploma to go to the ice cream parlor. We give you a diploma to get through college because it's hard. It's stressful. You got time work, homework. Some people are working. But on top of the stressors, often you'll have these sexual assault or abuse, military sexual assault, people that come back from the military being sick. Do you know that there's more men sexually assaulted in the military than women? But there's more men in the military, but it's not an uncommon thing for military people to be sexually traumatized. Again, family issues, people are going through relationship issues. People are breaking up, they're in controlling domestic violence situations. We have finance issues, sort of by the nature of going to school, you got finance issues, right? Especially in community college, but I'm sure in all colleges. Sexuality, a lot of people are still discovering who they are, what's going on. What's going on with themselves and others, so they're still stressed out or they're still dealing with their gender identity. Not all, not even most, but a fair amount in students in this setting. Medical issues, people are pregnant, don't want to be, people are pregnant and want to be, people on the spectrum, people have citizenship issues, probation issues, custody issues, which is the most ugly thing that you could ever go through. And our first responders are under stress as well. So mental health workers, corrections workers really had a tough time during the COVID thing and continue to have a hard time. So some of the above and all the above, right? So we want you to sort of calm down, again, take it easy, do visualization like this is a really good thing to do. So cultural issues though, Latinx, API, and African American Black communities, there's anxiety, mental health are often stigmatized, so people suffer in prolonged silence, in some of these communities, and due to the stigma of gets compounded by immigration, acculturation, trauma, and generational conflicts. You talk about, Black African American, all the Asian stuff goes back. You look at the history of Los Angeles pogroms in the 1870s, and the railroad, and the internment in the 40s. Japanese. This is not new, for Asian and American Pacific Islander communities, but it's been there, in indigenous communities. So, and there's systematic barriers, you're right, and religion can be a protective factor, but, it can also contribute to problems, to stigma with mental illness, if you're talking about demons and lack of faith and sinful behavior. And for some mental health issues or embarrassment and shame, if you have somebody on the autism spectrum in your family, you may not want to tell anybody. You may not want to tell anybody if you have somebody with intellectual disabilities. So it really impedes. So they may not communicate really well, their needs right away. And so things can get worse before they get better. For our LGBTQ folks, as you probably know, attempted suicide for transgender students is 50%. So there's a lot of mental health issues that come, not with all, not even with most, but with some people that are LGBTQ, come from highly rejecting families. The rate of attempted suicide is pretty high. So we know if we do safe zones, we just raised the pride flag in our central area of our college. So if you make your school a safe zone, straight male students suicide drops by 50%, and that's true across the country. They've done that study multiple times. So we encourage everybody to do safe zone trainings, make sure everybody knows about LGBTQ issues. But when you do that, all suicides drop by 9%. So it's a big issue to make sure that you do these trainings and you make sure that people feel safe when they come to campus. So how many protective factors do you have? You know, so take a little self-check and we'll look at these things. You have a positive mood, you have positive beliefs. These are protective factors that we try to encourage, sometimes try to teach. If you have a desire to finish school, if you have an internal locus of control, if you have good problem-solving skills, you got good frustration tolerance, you know, positive self-esteem, you got spiritual beliefs, no matter what they are, you attend some sort of spiritual group, you got culture and religious beliefs, and it's not so sometimes people with cultural issues, they can go back beyond maybe their parents or maybe their grandparents and realize they have a very rich culture that has helped the whole culture to survive and feel resilient, you know. If you have responsibility for family, not wanting to hurt yourself, and you have physical activities, you got a supportive family. So these are protective factors that if you have some of these, if you have all of these, you're probably going to do okay. But when you're helping somebody, you're kind of looking for the protective factors and you sort of lean on them to help people go. So if you got some social involvement, you know, that sort of thing. These are some of the main things to do, you know, to help you with anxiety. I can talk forever on all of these, you know, but mindfulness is number one. I don't know how I got through school without being mindfulness, but they didn't teach that in those days. So I was leaning on Eastern religions and stuff, you know, but meditation and breathing techniques, centering, sort of a 60s things where you sort of envision sort of a warm beam of life going through the center of your body, and visualizing. If you visualize the most beautiful place you know of in the world, it can help you with your, and you can do this with people on the spectrum. They know this. People on the spectrum have mental health issues just like everybody else. So do people on intellectual disabilities. You can teach these things to those folks. You can do these themselves and it'll help you to connect with your students. So what are you worried about right now? You know, what a typical stressor be, you know, if you just pay attention for 10 seconds on what you're worried right now, that's a typical stressor. Everybody's worried about something, unless you're on vacation somewhere and you calm yourself down. And you can calm yourself down by looking at something like this, you know. So we're not going to have too much time to talk about, you know, threat and anxiety, but you know, anxiety really is about keeping yourself alive by either fighting, flighting, or freezing. And a lot of times we feel a threat and we overreact physically and emotionally, and we get stuck on what we're afraid of instead of noticing that we don't really need to be so afraid that our body is in threat mode by increasing our anxiety, increasing our adrenaline, our breathing, oxygen intake, and muscle response. So we'll be like, sometimes we're just the frozen person, you know, like the rabbit in the woods, you know, with the heartbeat. So don't have time to get too much into this. We'll skip some of this stuff and the effects of stress. It can be positive and can be negative, but you have to have some stress or you would never really grow, right? So again, calm yourself down. And these are some of the things we can all do, right? Stretch. These will help you with your coping techniques. You can teach these to your students. Walking in nature. The Dutch really like this walking in the wind thing, uitweeën, you know. So sometimes we protect ourselves from the wind, but try it. Walking in the wind is really a good technique. Keeping a good schedule, including eating healthy, being creative, doing a musical instrument. I could not have gotten through college or graduate school without my guitar, guaranteed, you know. But any kind of creative arts, painting, baking, anything's good. But reducing media. A lot of our students are kind of stuck on porn, and this is true a lot with people on the spectrum. They'll get stuck on porn, or they get stuck on video games or whatever. And if you get stuck on impeachment news, you know, for a while I was pretty stuck on impeachment news. Like, man, that's just really interesting. And after a while, you just go, I gotta get off this. I can't watch it forever. By connecting with friends, old friends and extended family. We have a camp every summer. This kid is doing this. He's stretching, and he's getting together with friends. It's very, very helpful, If you've ever played baseball, you know that doing this with the bat is one of the best things you can ever do for stretching and mental health. Anybody that's played baseball knows why you're always doing this, because it just feels good, I come from USC, so I got to put this in. If you raise your hands really high and laugh and smile, this is a good technique for stress management. And pay homage to UCLA. This guy just beat University of Texas in a total upset. He's running off the field with his hands up. They won the big game. So again, your hands stretched up is really good for your mental health. And you can teach this to your students, Other things, join a Zoom group, exercise, take a little drive. Psychology, those of you from UCLA know that riding a bike on the pier, on the boardwalk of Santa Monica from Sunset Beach to Redondo is one of the coolest things. It's like the e-ticket for those of you who've been around long enough. It's one of the coolest, most relaxing things you can do. And now you can do it easily with the COVID thing, not as serious. But breathing techniques, learn meditation and mindfulness, visualization, and volunteering. It's also really good for stress, helps you with coping. And if you need to get involved in political campaigns, it's really fun and rewarding. And attend city council meetings or read a book, listen to an audiobook. Go swimming. Went swimming yesterday for the first time. Summer's here, so had to go in my son's pool. But just random acts of kindness. Cut down on the alcohol and drugs. Cut down on the gambling. Cut down on the porn if that's your thing. Look up at the sky, at the clouds, at the stars. Listen to music. Hopefully classical music or folk music or Irish music. Maybe not punk music. I used to say listen to any kind of music, but some of this punk music, playing it is good, but listening to it can get you a little more irritated. But take breaks and contemplate what to be grateful for. Accomplish something. If you accomplish something, you feel better. So these are, we're not gonna have time to talk to you about this or SSRIs to help with anxiety, but getting together with other people is really good. So remember, people do recover. Stigma is a big barrier, and keep in mind the cultural and socioeconomic issues with your students and with your colleagues. Again, calm down, take a breath. Do the Kobe thing. There's lots of apps that we've vetted. My younger therapists have vetted all these. They're free. They all are good. We've thrown out all the ones that we don't like at all or that cost. These are all helpful. Every one of these we've vetted and thought are good. So we hand these out to students, or we help students download them. So, and they're good for yourselves as well. You can also volunteer. You can also help your neighbors, but also always check on the strong. The people that look doing the best are not necessarily doing the best. So always check on the strong. Sometimes you get surprised if you ask, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing? What are you worried about? Stuff like that. What's going on? But you really want to know. Take a little extra time to find out what they're worried about today. This is volunteering. This represents the 1,100 students that take their lives every year. We hand out pizza to everybody that puts a suicide lifeline in their phone. So this was one of our students volunteering. Action plan and mental health first aid. We're almost done. This is something you can do with all your students, whether they're on the disability, they're intellectually disabled, they have autism, or they have a mental health issue. They'll come to you. This is what you can do with your family, with your friends. You can take an 8-hour class on this, so I'll give you a little sneak peek. First, you sort of assess, you can talk, you can ask, hey, are you thinking about suicide or something, one of these symptoms that we just talked about they're having? They come to you, or you notice in their class. It's hard to notice with Zoom, right? But you assess, is this somebody at risk? And there's a myth, as some of you know, that if you ask about suicide, it puts it in their head. It's not true. What the real question is, how many times, how many warning signs have they told everybody else, but you notice. So it's usually a sense of relief when somebody asks, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Try not to say commit, because we commit sins and we commit crimes. So we say, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking of dying by suicide? And you say that in a very non-judgmental manner. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have this skill already. So, but you listen non-judgmentally, you know. It's not like, no, she's no good anyway. Why are you worried about her? She's just, no. Listen non-judgmentally, just to make sure you get the whole story, right? Non-judgmentally, don't say, well, you know, that happened to me, you know, or that's not a big deal, you know. We'll just go, just listen non-judgmentally. They wouldn't be showing symptoms if there wasn't something really going on. Give reassurance and hope. You know, hope is one of the things that if you lose hope or you're feeling trapped, and people with autism often are suicidal. It's not unusual at all, especially because they've been bullied all their lives a lot of times. They don't really feel good about themselves. They get isolated. There's nobody there to really help them, as well with people with intellectual disabilities. So if you can give people hope, give people information, you know, encourage appropriate professional help, and that's us at the health center, but there's also a lot of other resources, and encourage self-help and other support strategies that we just talked about, like 25, 30 of them, you know. These are some resources that we use. You know, we have the Be the Difference SCV and Saga Strong that came from, you know, the Saga shooting and the health center. You know, these are some other resources that we use, our community resources, you know, including the DV program and Vet Center and Sexual Assault Center. But there's a coalition for working with people on the spectrum. People, it's the regional center and the education. That could be us, that can be the school district, community mental health centers, nonprofit sports like Family Focus, law enforcement. This is the community coalition. So you want to work with this whole coalition, get them all together so everybody knows that their role. It's not handing off one to the other. It's like, okay, it's mine and yours. So that's me, and I think I'm out of time.
Hi, Larry. I'm going to ask you to answer one question, and then we'll move to the next speaker.
Okay.
Could you speak to post-vention strategies with individuals on the spectrum?
Okay, so when we talk about post-vention, what we're really talking about is if there's been a suicide or if there's been a trauma, how do you address that as a community in general, and in our counseling program specifically. For instance, we had a shooting the other day at the fire station. And so we had to we got together as a community to say, okay, who's covering that? Who's covering the person's daughter? Who's covering, you know, because the person eventually took his own life. So it's knowing if you know somebody that's on the spectrum that's taken their life, or who knows somebody that's taken their life, you want to address that through whatever channel you can, whether it's through the school districts, through the college, making sure that counseling is available for those that knew, because we know when there's a suicide, it's always this large ripple effect, you know, and if we get on it soon enough and fast enough, we can decrease the contagion suicides or the things that happen as a result of that suicide. So somebody on the spectrum is just as affected as anybody else with a suicide, depending upon their level of knowledge. But, you know, being able to just take the time to talk about how they found out about it, what their reaction is to it, what are some of their resources, what are their, you know, protective and resilience factors. So getting on that right away with individuals, families, and communities, classrooms, as soon as you can. But it takes the community collaboration to do that, because, you know, I can go on and on, but in our community, a lot of times if there's a suicide, they call me. Why? Because I do all these trainings on suicide, but I call everybody else, or somebody will call me and I'll call everybody, or so people get to know, and then you put together kind of a really quick plan as soon as you can. Does that answer that, do you think?
Thank you so much. So thank you, Larry, for sharing from the wealth of your knowledge with the California community colleges. Larry is not leaving. He will respond to questions in the chat if there are additional questions. By the way, the person who asked that last question, they said that your response was satisfactory for what they were asking, Larry. So thank you.
Great.
I will now introduce our next speaker. Dr. Molly K. Rarick is an educator, researcher, and a nonprofit leader. Her current roles include, she's the founder and educational director of Ignite Collective, Inc. She serves as adjunct faculty at California State University, Northridge in the Graduate School of Education. Dr. Rarick is an educational consultant, adjunct trainer, and serves on the advisory board of Elevate Us Training. She is also an advisory council member for Disabled Sports Eastern Sierra and director of partnerships and outreach for PairBots, a technology nonprofit. Dr. Rarick holds a doctoral degree in educational leadership, a Master of Science degree in special education, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in elementary education. She has taught in Massachusetts and California and has presented at conferences throughout the United States. Her interests, her areas of interest include communication support, relationships and sexuality, higher education transitioning to adulthood, inclusive education, and outdoor adventures. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she has been collaborating with educators to develop and implement inclusive, accessible best practices. Thank you and welcome back, Dr. Rarick. Thank you for being willing to share from the wealth of your knowledge with the colleges. And now, without further ado, here's Dr. Molly Rarick.
Thank you so much for having me again. I was reflecting how time sort of flies, and I got to speak with your group last year, and I'm thankful that some things have changed and developed, and now I'm able to share some of these updates that we've been developing with the educators that I work with. So Will did a great job introducing me. I don't need to do that again. I think for the sake of this webinar, you can think of me as an educator first and foremost. A lot of what I'm going to be sharing comes to you through my work with other university faculty. And at Cal State Northridge, I supervise student teachers who are earning their credentials in moderate to severe special education, which of course the name is going to change soon, but that's what we have been thus far. So you'll hear some things that have been developed by the student teachers that we actually support, as well as a lot of the faculty and their mentor teachers. And these are teachers all over SoCal in a whole variety of different teaching environments and districts. So in my role also with Ignite, we support many people who do attend community colleges and four-year universities. I've seen some comments in there about where you all are from, and we have many students who attend your colleges. So we also have learned a lot about what that looks like. My staff are mentors. They support people one-on-one in getting accommodations, in registering for classes, interacting with their professors and their peers and all of that. And so we've learned a great deal just from being on the ground and supporting people in person. And you'll get my email address at the end too if you have questions about anything else that I do. I know it's kind of a laundry list, and so I'm an educator today. All right. So through this work with educators, families, I should also note I am a family member of a young man with autism. He's 21, who types to communicate and attends a community college. So also that little bit of a hat's on there. So we've collected a lot of information from the people that we support, the students they have, the families they interact with, and very much what Larry was talking about is people are overwhelmed. They continue to be worried, angry, nervous. You'll see anxious, confused, feeling alone, feeling tired, helpless. And I know some of you in the comments noted that educators too have been working nonstop and are feeling a lot of these things as well, myself included. It's been quite the ride. So what do we do about that as educators? I can't speak to mental health, that is not my field, but what do we do if we're in the classroom or maybe a counselor, or if we're working with a family in a way to address these types of things? these things come from what on earth is happening. Like, what are we doing now? What rules in place now? These feelings are happening because students have had to go back and forth from seeing their peers to not seeing their peers, to being on computers, to being in classrooms. And I think in the colleges, thankfully, the ones I'm familiar with, please correct me if I'm wrong, that things have been pretty much online for the bulk of this pandemic, versus public schools, K through 12, and transition programs, who have, some of whom have swung back and forth depending on the size of the district. So students are confused, families are confused, overwhelmed, all those feelings. Along with this idea is cohorts, right? So we're all familiar with that idea. So maybe you are in a cohort with people that you don't know. You don't get to see your friends anymore. You don't get to see the classmates who you're used to interacting with, or maybe you even have a different teacher, and potentially you've lost that relationship as well. There's lots of feelings around that as well. Student and family choice is huge, right? I'm sure many of you are parents also, and being asked to make decisions about what you want your students' schooling to look like. So maybe you get to choose between distance learning, hybrid learning, going back in person. Maybe that will change for you throughout the years, throughout the school year, or maybe not. And then these kind of nebulous words that we've heard a lot of feelings about in terms of reopening and returning, right? So if we're returning to campus, one of my student teachers made the very good point that she's never met her students in person ever. She's always seen them online. This is a new job for her. And so for them, returning isn't really returning. It's the start of a whole different relationship. It's like, how do we interact with each other in person, and how do I communicate with these people face to face? So I'd like for us to be really sensitive about how hard that can be for some people, as well as community-wise, right? Reopening of, say, restaurants and movie theaters and things like that can be very hard on the people that we're supporting and their families. So the bulk of what I want to share with you that is a takeaway are called student and family support plans. And again, you're going to get a link to this at the end of the presentation, where you will be able to find a whole bunch of videos and supporting documents to go with those videos, talking about how we can continue to support students and their families as things continue to be nebulous, as we're trying to figure out what's going on. So let me click through to this video, and oh good, it's nice and clear. I'd like to be able to share my sound. If you could tell me if you can hear this, someone on the panel maybe, that would be terrific.
I can hear you. I can hear it.
Excellent, thank you.
When we first moved to distance learning, I went to school and gathered many items from my classrooms to help with instruction at home.
Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 more letters, then you get another token.
After collaborating with parents, hello again. Hello. I realized that I needed to go back to campus and gather the environmental instructional supports that I had used to create engagement, sustained participation, and embedded instruction for many of my students. This is the Farmer Refuted. It is on Canvas. This way you guys can read lyrics as we're going through it. Some of these tools, like anchor charts, study cards, and timers, could be used as is. And others, like the daily picture schedule and first then charts, needed to be adjusted for the home environment. Talking through them with parents and collaborating on adjustments helped us both create supports for goal implementation at home. Do you have any ideas that you want to possibly add?
Yeah, for right now, I'm comfortable with this. When you gave us that other chart, she finished it like that.
As time goes on, we continue to refine the tools identified in the initial family support plan and the goal activity matrix. Does that work?
Yep.
Perfect.
All right, so this comes through a group called Excellence Together. You should be able to see there on the slide. So it's excellencetogether.org, and again, that'll be at the end. of my slides. And it's an initiative through WISH Charter School. If you're familiar with that, it's a charter school through LA Unified, kind of near LAX, that is fully inclusive. So all students are included in all classes, and it is a co-teaching model. So if you're not familiar, it's super cool, and I encourage you to look that up. So let me advance that. Move on. All right. Oh, now I'm stuck. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so something that they are referring to in this project is called the Distance Learning Family Support Plan. It could be updated to say hybrid learning. It could be, you know, we don't know what's going on, family support plan. And ideally, again, these are all included on that website. So you don't, if you're welcome to take screenshots, but you don't have to. This is just one part of the support plan. So this is really encouraging educators at all levels, so yourselves included, to be talking with families and figuring out how you can best support them. I'm sure some of you have been doing this already. This is a sort of method that has been put together with input from many teachers through their experience in using the tool. So you might find some of the questions eye-opening, as I did. I'm always learning something when I look at these. So essentially, it's a series of a few online meetings. Now, of course, it might be in person if the family chooses to do that, to learn about what goes on at home and how you can support students, whether they're doing distance learning, whether they're engaged in hybrid learning, maybe over the summer too. If the student doesn't have support over the summer, it might be nice to know maybe if you could check in every now and then and lend your support, give resources, share some of the things that Larry shared, and other stuff that's out there. So it is asking, what are your hopes for distance, hybrid, again, whatever the model is, this kind of learning. Maybe what are your hopes for taking this child development class online or this math class online? Do you want to do it for fun? Are you just really in love with math and you want to learn more about it? Do you want to attend this class to make friends? Do you want to earn a certificate or a degree? So then we know what kinds of supports we can give them. And what are your greatest concerns? Certainly with adult students, if they have reliable communication, you should be asking them along with the family. So concerns are, I'm lonely. I don't know how to work the computer. I am worried about taking tests online. I really wish that I could see people in person. It could be things that we don't expect as well. And then what types of support would be most useful? And what I find in gray here on the bottom, if you can see that, the question is, what types of support would be most useful to you and your child during this time? So again, if it's an adult student, maybe just to you, what kind of supports would be useful? That's a really open-ended question, and we find that a lot of people aren't able to answer with, well, I need to check in on the phone 2 times a week, and it would be really helpful if you could help me set up reminders on my cell phone. So instead of waiting for someone to tell you what they need, we find it really helpful to give examples. So we have things like phone call check-ins, online meetings, hands-on things to do at home, interactive meetings with friends online, training for families or support people, video examples of strategies. So that, again, is specific to supporting students with disabilities. How do I get him to do his math if he doesn't want to do his math? Or how can I help him calm his body down? Those types of things. So again, this is just one screenshot. The other couple resources that are on there, one is called a game plan. So it is a matrix where you can sort of help the family find ways to practice things at home that the student would normally be practicing on your campus or wherever you might be. So again, if this is socialization and the person really liked going to the cafe on campus and getting a burrito for lunch every day, what kinds of things can he do at home that kind of mimic that? So having a lunch date with a friend online, or calling a family member every day at lunch, learning how to make his own burrito, things that are still getting at those same kinds of goals, academic or not. So I really encourage you to look at that resource. I find it very helpful for all ages. And most of all, we just need to be sure to ask people, is this helpful? I think you heard Genevieve in that video saying, how is this looking? And mom said, yeah, this is great. And she said something like, this is better than the last one because she flew through that last one. And so asking if something is working, if there's anything more you can do. And on the flip side, asking, is this too much? Is it helpful for me to be calling you every week, or is it annoying? Is it like, something that you dread? How is that going for us? So another important part that we are learning, of course, this whole time, as Larry alluded to before too, social interaction and the loss of that, especially for people who are socially isolated to begin with, has been enormous. And again, I'm talking all ages. I have student teachers who are teaching pre-K all the way through transition age. And then of course, all of you with your adult students. So we've talked a lot with our groups about what that can look like. I have some thoughts on the next slide. It is not an exhaustive list for sure. And again, this may be an exploratory thing. You may be asking, giving advice and then asking, hey, did that work? I found this online meetup for people who love playing the pandemic board game. You should go to that, and then seeing if that is something that worked out for the student, and if not, finding a new way. Something that we've been doing as an agency is supporting people in online dating. Particularly, our agency supports people with developmental disabilities. So I've had most experience supporting a young man with autism who set up his profile, and learning a lot about disability disclosure, how to describe yourself in a truthful manner, how to safely interact with people online, how to tell if someone's real versus, a bot, or someone not being truthful. All of those kind of nuances that we all need to learn if we're doing that, that may be a little bit harder for people who find that social interaction more tough. If you want more information about that, I'm happy to share some stuff we've done on that as well at a later time. So some ideas. Simply sharing about our lives, daily check-ins with your students, or support people if that's something they want on a daily basis. Things like sharing weekend news. So if you're talking to someone early in the week, you can ask, what happened over this weekend. That reminded me when I was taking Spanish classes in high school, that was our check-in, and we had to tell everyone in Spanish what we did the week before weekend. Also asking families for updates. So if your students don't have reliable communication, or maybe it's harder for them to recall, have trouble with memory, that kind of thing, having that relationship with families is really helpful, because you can ask, what did you do? So I can give some questions that are relevant. I heard you went to the beach. How was that? What did you do there? Did you enjoy it? How was the weather? Classroom interactions. If you are teaching online or in a hybrid manner, I know this has been a big struggle for many teachers who have been doing this for a long time now. Simple things like having students call on each other, who wants to go next, kind of like old school popcorn if you're reading out loud and you're throwing a ball to the next reader. So who, John, you read, who would you like to go next? And again, for reliable communication support, you might offer, do you want Maria to go next, or do you want Susie to go next? And they can make a choice rather than having to come up with that language. For myself, I find breakout room activity is really nice. I'm kind of a shy person, definitely an introvert. And the idea of talking in a big group, I just get lost. I listen, but I don't really get the interaction. So being mindful about your students' proclivities, what they prefer, how they prefer to interact, and mixing it up too. So students get to be with people they know and like, and be with new people, see if you can help develop some relationships that way. And then even online parties like birthday parties, holiday parties. You could have a Flag Day party today. Things that you might be doing normally in your classroom or office, just moving it online, or doing it in a hybrid manner and giving people choices. Hey, I'm going to offer this time to celebrate, the 4th of July. Well, you probably won't be at work, but time to celebrate somebody's birthday. You're welcome to come online or come in person. And then these are some things our student teachers have suggested for just fun activities. There's a fun one, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Scriblio, perhaps, that is about, it's an online interactive drawing thing, platform. So people can play games on there. You could do simple stuff like tic-tac-toe. You can draw together. I'm sure any of you who are artists can figure out ways for people to interact like that. Having online or hybrid dance parties, game nights, things that might have been happening in person before, we can find creative ways to do, and make sure that you're accommodating everyone in terms of whether they want to come in person or online, whether they want to dance or not, or just watch, making it comfortable for everybody. And another thing that comes up in a huge way is the importance of touch, and how little touch some people have been getting throughout this whole pandemic. We got reports from one teacher who I believe she's an elementary school teacher, and they came back in person rather early in terms of the districts, and her students, they weren't supposed to touch each other or the teachers, and they could not stop themselves. Students with disabilities, especially autism, sometimes that physical regulation is not there, the body-brain connection is not there, and she said she got rushed with hugs by her students, which of course was against the rules. It was lovely, and they pretty much spent that whole first few days getting to know each other again. So I really recommend, when and if you are able and comfortable touching people, handshakes, fist bumps, if somebody wants a hug, of course, getting consent, it's melting people right now. That feeling of being able to touch each other is enormous. Okay. So my one last note, I do a lot of work in the world of transition, so from high school to adulthood, and I'm sure many of you have students who are either in that age range or kind of transitioned into community college during that time. There's a lot of anxiety out there from the students, from the families about, like, I just missed a year and a half worth of a transition program. Like, yeah, it was online, big whoop, it wasn't the same. So I'd encourage you to listen and help people know that there are still supports for them, even if they have somehow, missed out on things like community-based instruction. I'm hearing, what about work skills? Or I'm not ready to go to college. I'm not ready for a job. I missed out on all that community interaction. What if the job I want no longer exists? What if I had eyes on working at the coffee shop down the street and it's closed now? I've been working on this and I don't know what to do. So certainly accessing resources like Larry's office on his campus, if there's other resources on your own campus, if they're feeling those feelings of anxiety, depression, those types of things, and also just taking the time to listen and ensuring that you're there for them. You're going to help them figure it out. Everyone's figuring it out. It's not like they're the only ones who got left behind, without being able to do that community stuff. All right. And so here is the website for the videos and all of those documents. It's excellencetogether.org. If someone wants to put that in the chat too, that would be awesome. Excellencetogether.org is the main one, and to access the videos, it's /projects.html. And then I am Molly. I'm at molly@ignitefutures.org. I'm really happy to talk to anybody about anything. And then I think, Will, we were going to do questions. Is that right?
That's right. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Let's see if I can. Great. So if you have questions, please feel free to insert those into the chat. And I'm going to ask if people can hang out with us for a few more minutes. Actually, at this moment, while we're waiting for questions, I'm going to ask if you can take a quick second to complete this one question poll. Larry, if you would, do you have that video ready to go?
Sure.
Yeah, so Larry referenced a video earlier on that we wanted to be able to share with you, and we were not sure if we would have enough time. Given that we have some time now, we will show that video in a moment. So I see a question. The question is, how do you help someone who is having a meltdown to calm down if you are with them? And then could you please, Molly, if you would get that, those two links ready, and if you could drop those into the chat, that would be great. So the question again, how would you help someone who is having a meltdown? You're trying to get them to calm down while you're with them.
When we talk about mental health, we really talk about our emotions.
Go ahead, if you were responding, Larry. Oh, you're muted, Larry.
Because it was like people.
Sorry,
I
flipped the.
Oh, it's the video.
Can you, sick or get sick myself.
Yeah, can you, yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
of course.
how to calm somebody down. So the first thing, you know, you really, obviously, the more you know about the person, the better, you know, but also I always tell people, you calm yourself down first. You know, you have to be really mindful of your emotional response to things. And sometimes it takes starting off by really being, breathing yourself, calming down and making sure that you're not in the threat response mode. Because when you're in a threat response mode, your problem solving and thinking isn't as clear as it needs to be, and your memory and everything you've learned about all these disorders and stuff, so it goes out the window. So take the time to breathe and be focused. Make sure that you keep up the right kind of distance from somebody. You want to make sure you know where the boundary is. Don't get in somebody's space, but you also want to make sure that somebody, whoever's being agitated, knows they're safe, you know, so they have, you know, an escape. So you don't like block their way out of the room or block your way out of the room. So you have to pay attention to where the doors are and where the exits are. I try to tell people, keep your knees bent, you know, and your hands in front of you, so you're not behind you. Then, you know, hands are in front of you. You're calm, you're relaxed, but your knees are kind of bent in case you need to be the shortstop or the defense or the soccer player, where if you have to move this way, you have to move this way. You're not going to get hurt, and your hands are in front of you. You can get, you know, out of the way or defend yourself. You know, but really, also you want to make sure that you talk in short sentences. You know, just because somebody's not responding doesn't mean they're not hearing you. Just because they're not responding doesn't mean they're not intelligent. They're not what's going on. But your idea is to engage with them as much as possible. Don't raise your voice. Stay calm. And just say, you know, we can talk about this. We can talk about this. You know, we can let me know what's going on. Because a lot of times people get agitated and they don't think anybody's listening. So you get back to that, listen non-judgmentally, right? Give people reassurance. Okay, I think we can work this out. There's going to be some way we can work this out, you know. And depending on where it goes, you know, if somebody's really a danger to themselves or others, then you might have to really bring in others, you know, let other people know what's going on, whether it's 911 sometimes, or your safety on campus, or if something's really going on, you can let someone know in the classroom to go get some help. For us, it's like you go to the phone and dial 7. Safety is there, you know, or you know somebody's there. You know, our operator, and then our operator, you know, dials in safety. So you have to really know what your safety protocols are on campus, so you know what to do in case it gets, you know, out of control. My experience is, you know, don't touch, keep a distance, have a boundary, and stay calm yourself, and you'll be able to be more precise in how you respond to any kind of issue that's on campus. Usually it's like people on the spectrum, they can get really super frustrated, they may get frustrated because you don't give them the right kind of tests, or they feel like you haven't been, fair or whatever. But if you just sort of listen non-judgmentally, usually they'll calm down and you can have a conversation. Hope that helps, get you in the ballpark at least.
Great, thank you. I see your hand is raised, Louis. Would you like to ask a question? Let's see if. Okay, would you like to do that video now then, Larry?
Yeah, let's see if we can do it. I try to go from one angle. Let me try this angle. I have to be able to share. For some reason, I can't seem to get that up.
Okay, in the meantime, for those that have not yet responded to the one question poll, please, oh, I see you accidentally raised your hand. No worries. If you have not yet responded to the poll, please do so. Thank you very much. We are waiting a second to see if Larry can pull up that.
Can you see that video, Francis?
No, I can see you, just you.
Oh, man.
Mhm.
Okay, so I have to, for some reason, I can't get my screen share feature up.
Okay.
So
if there are additional questions,
here we are.
We welcome your questions.
Here we go. So this is an anxiety. This is made by students, an award-winning film made by a student for the Art with Impact program, who come on our program, our campus regularly, and we show these films and have a discussion around mental health issues. I really like this film because it's about anxiety. It's about what it feels like if you have an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And people I've shown this to that have panic attacks, they say that's exactly what it's like. And people with intellectual disabilities and autism, it's not infrequent to have panic attacks for whatever reason, because they may feel dissociative or something. So I'm gonna share this real quick, and hopefully you can see it. So can you see the blank screen at least now?
Yes, I can see the blank screen.
Okay, so let's go with it then. Can you see the film now?
Yes, maybe a little more volume would help.
Hey Mel, what are the chances of you getting days off of work? Thinking about us going on a road trip.
Just let me know the days and I'll quit.
What?
Uh-oh. Try it again. Sorry.
Hey Mel, what are the chances of you getting days off of work?
For what?
Been thinking about us going on a road trip.
Just let me know the days and I'll quit.
Okay. What? I haven't even told you where we're going yet.
I've been thinking about leaving that place anyways.
Why?
Oh, don't even get me started.
Okay, he just said road trip. I want to know where we're going.
See, I was talking.
Right.
You knew this would happen. Why'd you even come? You need to leave.
You don't want to stay.
They're going to notice. They're going to notice.
Well, I don't. Come on, I'm trying to get you drunk.
Problem is, she can get me drunk. All she needs.
Okay, you guys realize my parents don't live there, right? Like,
Right. Okay. All right. Let's aim for next month. Val, you in?
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, you okay?
Yeah, I just have to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
yeah.
So,
No, I feel like it'd be really fun.
I'm thinking the second week of the month. Does that work for you guys?
Second week?
Yeah. I'm into it. I haven't been in a while. I like
You can't breathe. You're going to die. This is why you shouldn't have come. Now you can't leave.
Hey. Hey. Val? Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. You're okay. It's just a panic attack. Breathe. Breathe. Come here.
So if you've ever had a panic attack, you could relate to that. But also what he did was just kind of help her to calm her down, calm her down. If you know you're having a panic attack, it's you know it's a panic attack, and the people around you know it's a panic attack. But if you don't know it's a panic attack, it feels a lot like a heart attack. So you're gonna want to get medical attention if you don't know it's a panic attack. So that's sort of like, sometimes, are you having an anxiety attack? Yes. You know, have you had these before? Yes. No, I have never. Then you're really going to go to 911 and go to the hospital and make sure everything's okay. But people on the spectrum and students, this is not an uncommon situation where they just feel overwhelmed, you know. And there's plenty of other kind of videos that show, you know, depression and other kinds of feelings that people have. But pick this one out because it's not an uncommon kind of reaction. We're kind of expecting these kinds of reactions to happen as people return back into the social situation.
Thank you for that, Larry. Someone has asked for that, for the link to that video again. I thought we shared it already, but if we haven't, if we could share that, that would be great.
You know, I'll try to find it. I thought I shared it, and I realized both of the ones I shared were another one from KHTS that made lately. Let's see if I can track that down real quick.
Sure. And I will be certain to share the link via email as well. I want to thank our presenters. I know that your time is valuable, and some of you may have appointments or other things. Again, thank you to Dr. Molly Rarick and Larry Schallert for presenting today. Thank you to my esteemed colleague, Christina Martinez, who has greatly assisted me over the course of the last year with various key features producing these webinars. Thank you, Christina, and to our audience participants. Thank you for attending today. You power these webinars with your thirst for information and the dialogue that you engage in with us. By the way, Larry, someone wanted to know if Stephen King was the producer of that video. They indicated that it was powerful. And I'm not sure whether or not we want to do another calming exercise to assist with that individual and those of us that may have had a rise from that video.
You know, it's certainly a very powerful video. I'm going to put this thing in the chat right now.
The link to the chat. Yeah.
Link to the chat. As soon as I can get myself back to where you guys are.
Again, thank you to everyone.
Anxiety. It's called Anxiety. Yeah, it's very powerful. It's a student film, but award-winning, nationally award-winning film. And we know when you watch this kind of stuff, it can bring up stuff. So when, you know, my favorite thing is to do standard breathing kind of thing. Breathe through your nose, hold it 4 seconds, breathe out through your mouth like a straw, and 4 seconds. And it's very, very quick and easy. You'll see every pitcher that ever pitches, they'll do that before every pitch. Every basketball player that's ever played, before he throws up a free throw, he will do that, or she will do that. So that's a good way to just sort of calm yourself down and stay relaxed. But
thank you very much. Again, thank you to our esteemed presenters, Dr. Molly K. Rarick and Larry Schallert, for presenting today. Again, thank you to our audience participants who shared by listening and asking questions. At this point, I want to ask that you will stay safe and enjoy summer. We hope that we will see you again in the fall with another series of webinars. Please, if you have not done so, click on the link to complete the evaluation to this webinar. We use your input and your feedback to develop these webinars. It's all dependent upon you. Thank you very much for your valued input. Enjoy the rest of the day. Stay as cool as you can. Take care.
Have a great summer, everyone.